All right. Well, what is up? If we haven't met before, as you can hear, I am from Australia. But when I come to America, I love going to your baseball games. And the bit I love the most is the rally cap. And we all know the rally cap. The rally cap is when your team is losing, you grab your cap and then you put it on upside down, sideways, inside out. Because what the rally cap is saying is this: whatever we're doing is not working. So now we need to flip things around, inside out, upside down. But maybe that's how life feels like right now. Whatever we're doing is not working. So maybe we too need to flip things around, inside out, upside down. This week at Chapel, I'm doing this series, Unleashing the Power of Paradox, flipping the script on an upside down world, where we look at stories that Jesus tells us in the Bible, where Jesus uses these stories to flip our world upside down the right way up. And today we're going to look at this. We're going to look at the paradox of happiness. And the question we're going to try to answer is this: what do I have to do to be happy? And we've just heard a very strange story in the Bible. And it's about a manager, a dishonest manager. And this manager is going to follow the script that we've been told on how to be happy. But there's going to be a paradox in the story. And Jesus is going to use this paradox to flip the script for us. So what do I have to do to be happy? Well, the script we're normally given is this: well, you got to do whatever it takes to be happy. In the story, we read this. Jesus told his disciples there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. We meet a manager who's dishonest with money, but hey, you got to do whatever it takes to be happy. Now, I love people to complete this sentence. Hey, I want my children to be happy, right? But see, I go to a Chinese church and they never know how to answer this one. In a Chinese church, they always go, hey, I thought it was successful. I go, no. That's why you moved to America, so your children could be happy. Because this is the founding story of the USA, the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. And what are these rights? That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's the whole reason this nation exists, so we can be happy. And happiness is the judge of everything. We're trying to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. And for those of us who study philosophy, we know that this is utilitarianism, the greatest good for the greatest number of people, but good is measured by what causes happiness. And so if something increases happiness, well, that's morally good. But if something decreases happiness, well, that's morally bad. It is the reason why if you're in Asia and you go to your careers counselor and you ask her, what should I do when I grow up? She will say, well, what do your parents want you to do? But in the USA, if you ask your careers counselor what you should do, she will say, well, what do you want to do? Do whatever makes you happy. And it's a great story. It's a reason why we can date whoever we want to date, not who mum and dad tell us to date. It's a reason why we can live in whatever city we want to live in, not the city that mum and dad grew up in. And it's a reason why we can choose whatever job we want, not the job that mum and dad want us to do. But if it's such a great story, why are we so miserable, exhausted, and tired? Well, there's a paradox, you see, and the paradox of happiness is this: if I'm trying to be happy, why aren't I happy? Back to the story. So the rich man called in the manager and asked him, hey, what's this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer. And the manager said to himself, what shall I do now? My boss is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. The wheels fall off for this man, and they too fall off for us when we try to be happy. Something doesn't work. Why? Well, it's the paradox of happiness. Paradox number one is this, what they call hedonic adaptation. What is hedonic adaptation? Well, we all know that feeling when we wake up in the morning, we have that first cup of coffee and bzzz, the buzz is amazing. You can feel it go from the top of your head all the way down to your toes. Later in the morning, you have your second cup of coffee. This time there's buzz, but not so much buzz. In the afternoon, you have your third cup of coffee. This time, no buzz. What's happened? Well, you got used to the coffee. You adapted, you recalibrated to it as if it was a new norm. And the same thing happens in happiness. Like, this is why when you push a kid on a swing, they're always saying going higher, 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 because they've adapted to it. Until you say, I can't make this go any higher, you'd be spinning round and round. It's the reason why when you were a kid, you beg your parents for a new toy. If I have this toy, I'll be happy forever. And your parents will say, no, you're just going to get sick of it. But you say, no, this time for sure, I'll be happy forever. But your parents will give you the toy, and sure enough, you got happy for a week, but then you got bored with the toy. Jonathan Haidt, secular sociologist, he writes the happiness hypothesis, and he says this is what happens with happiness. You might get a new car. You might get a new job, you might have a new romantic partner, and yes, you'll be happy, but after only 1 or 2 years, you'll be back to where you were before. In Germany, they did this study. On the horizontal axis, this is how many years before you get married, how many years after you get married. On the vertical axis, how happy you are out of 10. So as you can see, 4 years before you get married, you are hovering around 3 out of 10 for happiness. Then you meet someone. Oh, now you're getting happier and happier. On the day you get married, you're as happy as you will be. You are 7 out of 10. And then after you get married, it's like a cliff. It's like a cliff. After only 2 years, you are back to where you were before. And after 5 years, you are less happy than you were before you got married. I love showing this slide in front of married couples because you can always see the wife looking at the husband. Husband, is that you? Is that you? And the husband going, no, I'm happy. This is a German study. We're Americans. We're okay. But we adapted to whatever made us happy. Paradox number 2, it's the arrival fallacy. This is from Arthur Brooks. He writes on happiness in the Atlantic. He's a person of faith. And the arrival fallacy is this. We are like dogs chasing a car, but once we get the car, we don't know what to do. And we are happy as long as we're chasing what we think what will make us happy, but once we find it, we won't be happy. This is Jill Stark. She writes this book, Happy Never After. And it's her second book because it describes what happened after she wrote her first book. Her first book became, boom, a #1 bestseller, but that just sent her into a spiral of anxiety and depression. And apparently this is very common with authors. They pour years into a book, and then when it comes out, they go, is this as good as it will be? I thought it would be something more. We won't get happy when we find what we thought would make us happy. And paradox number 3 is this. It's called the hedonic fallacy. The hedonic fallacy is simply by looking for happiness, we won't find it. And I remember listening on NPR, and they interviewed a young lady in her early 20s, and she suffers from anxiety and depression, and she says this. She says, we grew up with our parents saying, we just want you to be happy. Be happy. I mean, if your parents tell you to get a job and make money, at least you know when you've achieved those things. But we grew up with our parents saying, we just want you to be happy. So you end up sitting around being like, well, did I do this thing that my parents told me to do? Like, am I happy? Have I achieved it yet? You're anxious because your parents essentially said to you, the most important thing is for you to be happy. You chase it, and and the chase itself trips you up and makes you less happy. So what can we do to flip the script? This is how we flip the script. We say, you know what? Maybe it's not about happiness. Let's go back to the story. The manager said to himself, I know what I'll do so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses. So he called in each one of his boss's debtors. He asked the first, how much do you owe my boss? 900 gallons of olive oil, he replied. Well, the manager told him, well, take your bill, sit down quickly, Make it $450. Then the manager asked the second, how much do you owe? 1,000 bushels of wheat. He replied. The manager told him, take your bill and make it 800. The boss commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. In this very strange passage, we see that the manager flips the script. He realizes his value system has been all wrong, and now he has to change it completely, flip it inside out, upside down. Now, of course, Jesus is saying, he's not saying be like this guy in being dishonest. What Jesus is saying, hey, come on, if a worldly person can work it out, if a dishonest person can work it out, surely you, the children of God, people of the light, you can work it out. Well, what has this person worked out that we too need to work out? Well, flip number one is this. It's actually not about happiness. It's about relationships. Now, think about all the things that make us happy. If you traveled to Paris, you would be happy. If you watched a movie, you'd be happy. If you ate a stack of pancakes, you would be happy. But notice these things. Notice that when you travel somewhere exotic, it's happy because you did it with someone. If you went to Paris by yourself, you'd be lonely. Notice if you watch a movie, you want to watch it with someone. It's all right to watch a movie by yourself every now and then, but if that's all you did, it would be lonely. And a stack of pancakes, yes, this would be more fun by yourself. But even then, you'd be taking pictures of yourself eating it and taking pictures of your pancakes so you can upload and say, hey, look at me, I'm eating pancakes. Why? Because we want to share the moment. Life is actually about, can I share this moment with someone? This is Sophie Scott, TED Talk, neuroscientist, and she did the science of laughter. We are 20 times more likely to laugh at something if we're in the presence of someone we know, love, and trust. See, it's not what we do, but who we have next to us that counts. This is Robert Waldinger in the most watched TED Talk of all time. What makes a good life? And to answer this, he refers to a Harvard study that went over 70 years longitudinally, that studied the lives of 70 men, and they worked out what has the number one correlation with happiness and a long life. And they found the number one correlation with happiness was not whether you had $1 million or not. The number one correlation with happiness was not whether you had paid off your house or not. The number one correlation with happiness was not whether you were the CEO of a company or not. No, the number one correlation with happiness and a longer life was the quality of our relationships. Do I have somebody in my life? And we're not talking about romantic relationships. We're just talking about friendship relationships. Do I have somebody? That is what counts in life. And flip number two, it's not about happiness. It's actually about purpose. Do I know why I'm here? I love playing rugby. I used to play rugby in Australia. I played rugby when I was living in Chicago. But I had a friend I used to play rugby with, and one day I found out he had stopped playing rugby. So I asked him, how come you're no longer playing rugby? And my friend said, well, I was playing a game, and suddenly I found myself at the bottom of one of those scrum things, and everyone was standing on top of me. And that's when I wondered, why? Why am I doing this? And suddenly, if you don't have a why, it's no longer fun. We need a why. This is Paul Dolan, not a Christian. He has a PhD in happiness. He has his book, Happiness by Design. And he says this. He says we have things that give us pleasure and we have things that give us purpose. Things that give us pleasure with no purpose, like eating a pizza on a Friday night, watching a movie, well, that's pleasurable, but there's no purpose. And after a while, it ends up being a bit empty. But there are things that give us purpose but no pleasure, like helping a friend move house, studying for an exam, giving birth to a child. They're not pleasurable, but they're purposeful, and they're actually rich and fulfilling. This is Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, Jewish Holocaust survivor. Viktor Frankl says, we shouldn't look for suffering, but suffering will find us. And at that moment, we need a why. We need a purpose. And Viktor Frankl gives a fictitious story of two women. One woman, through the fortunes of life, she is born rich and beautiful. The other woman, through the misfortunes of life, she gives birth to a child with profound disabilities. This woman, at the end of her life, she'll go, what was all that about? Like, I had a lot of money, I went to a lot of parties, and I flirted with a lot of men. But really, what was that all about? Her life will be empty, self-absorbed, and unfulfilling. But this woman, at the end of her life, will say, wow, I raised a child with profound disabilities, and her life will be rich and fulfilling. Why? Because she lived for a story bigger than just her own. And that's what we need. We too need a story bigger than just our own. And that's why the Bible says when Jesus comes, he is the Logos who became flesh and he lived among us. See, we need a story, but for a story, we need a designer who gives us a design, a reason why we're here. And Logos can be translated many ways, but one way is this: Jesus is the design. He's the ultimate story. He becomes flesh, and that's why he comes here. So do you remember our original question was this? Well, what do I have to do to be happy? And today we've seen this. Usually the script we're told is this: you gotta do whatever it takes to be happy. But we've seen there's a paradox to this. If I'm trying to be happy, I actually won't be happy. But if we flip the script, we realize it's not about happiness. It's actually not about happiness, but living for others. Is there somebody in my life that I'm living for? It's not about happiness, but living for a bigger story than just your own. Do we have a why we're here? And now in the bigger story of the Bible, the reason why Jesus tells this story, it's not about happiness, but living in relationship with Jesus and for Jesus. Let Jesus be that ultimate somebody in our life and the ultimate story that we live for. See, if we try to chase a rainbow, we will never find it, because the rainbow is an accidental byproduct of something else, the sun. But if we chase the sun, we actually just might find rainbows along the way. And it's the same with life. If we chase happiness, we will never find it, because it's actually the accidental byproduct of something else. But if we chase Jesus, we will find meaning and purpose, and happiness just might be something we find along the way. Now, there's a weekend where my wife and I stayed at home and we were cleaning. And I hate cleaning. There's something about cleaning that just sucks the soul, the joy of life out of me. So I said to my wife, hey, I've got a brilliant idea. How about I go surfing, you keep cleaning, and at the end, we'll come back together and we'll go out for a dinner to celebrate. And she gave me the "you can go if you want to" answer. Oh. Now, for you single men, that sounds like a yes, go if you want to. But for you married men, you know, no, that is a no answer disguised as a yes answer. Go if you dare. And I didn't dare, because I knew no matter how good the surfing was, if my relationship was wrong, then life will be miserable. See, it's not what we do, it's not what we have that counts. It's who we have in life that counts. There was a time where I was actually in the Canadian Rockies skiing, living on snow for 5 weeks. And it sounds amazing. But after 1 week, I got bored. I thought, what am I doing here? I have no reason to be here. And skiing in the end just gets boring, because you just catch your ski lift that goes up and you come back down. and then you catch the same ski lift that goes up, and then you come down again. And after I think, if I don't catch the ski lift up, I don't have to come down. Like, why am I doing this? So there was no reason why, and something just sucked the joy out of it. And I remember after 1 week, I opened the pages of my Bible, and it fell open on this page, and it said this: "How lovely is your dwelling place, Lord Almighty. My soul yearns, even faints for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God. Better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. Even 1,000 days on the Canadian Rockies skiing was not as good as one day in the presence of God." So what do we have to do to be happy? It's not what we do. It's not what we have, but do I have the ultimate somebody and the ultimate story to live for? And Jesus says, let me be that ultimate somebody, and let me be your ultimate story. Thank you.
Sam Chan, ladies and gentlemen, come on, let's...